And by the way, Comet C2020 M3, it had its closest approach yesterday.
Interesting.
And you can see, we see the Belt of Orion, which, coincidentally, the Great Pyramids align with, and other, actually, monuments on the Earth are inclined towards the Belt of Orion as well. And here's the comet flying by that area.
All a bunch of coincidences.
There's so many coincidences. So our brother Mark J., who I will insert a link after, once he sends me his link to his YouTube channel. I'll insert it here so you guys could go check out his channel, subscribe, and give him a thumbs up. He takes a lot of interesting pictures. He's actually had stuff put up on Mr. MBB's. So he sent me this, and this is Comet Atlas, and he was saying it's breaking up. And so he wanted to send me a photo of it. And let's see if we could get it over here. And he circled it. And, saw this and thought, well, that's interesting. Is it breaking up? The other thing is, too, this looks really kind of squarish, from this angle here. So, we took a look. And, blowing it up, it's really weird. Now, I don't know if this is just some sort of strange artifact or what. Is this? It might be just a light refraction. It could simply be a light refraction from perhaps two pieces here, because it does seem to be brighter over here and over here. But isn't it interesting how it kind of makes a square? Very, very curious. Now, again, this might be absolutely nothing. It could just be the refraction of the light, like we see with sundogs, and we see like up more towards the Arctic area. Sometimes we'll see what looks to be many suns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just looks, I don't know, it feels kind of weird too.
Has a weird vibe. And again, I'm not saying that this is actually a square. It's just so curious the way it comes out. And so our good friend Raven too, who has degrees in religious studies, philosophy, PhDs, he said exactly what I immediately thought too. And so I'm going to share that with you guys. But, again, this is probably just some sort of refraction of light, but it got me thinking about this curious passage in the Bible that talks about the New Jerusalem descending from the sky.
I remember that passage. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Because it's a square. It's actually a cube. And, who would make... I mean, you just don't think of a spaceship as being a cube shape. But who knows? Advanced technologies, they could probably do whatever they want. And it's just curious because when you read the passage, it does feel like it's a gigantic mothership coming out of the sky.
And what about all of these new processes and procedures they're putting into place as of recently?
Meaning?
Well, with the plague upon the land, and they're kind of getting people under control and perhaps wanting to, I can't even say the word, but...
Oh, I know where you're going.
Yes.
So you're going to what we're going to be talking about next. It's just a really curious passage. New Jerusalem comes descending from the sky. And according to the Bible, this is how big it would be. I mean, it would literally go from Jerusalem right to Rome. Isn't that a curious fact? That it's the size, exactly the size pretty much, that would take it from Jerusalem to Rome, and in a square pattern. So it would be all the way over in Libya, throughout Egypt, and heading on up into Europe. Wow, I mean, that's really pretty wild to think about. The Earth itself is 7,900 miles in diameter. And so, you see when you look at what they describe it, the city's exact dimensions are measured by an angel, interesting, angel and angle. Yeah. There's a lot of things in here that when people just look at things completely literally, maybe they're missing the picture, because there's so many different layers to the symbolisms. Like we've talked about this before when they talk about the 7 lampstands, the 7 cities. They're referring to the 7 chakras. And the references to 12 can refer also to our DNA and where we're going. There's so many different, there's so much symbolism there that's not completely understood when we just take things literally. If you just look at Revelation and you look at the dragon and the kings and the kingdom, and gosh, I remember listening to Hal Lindsey, back in the 90s. That's how long ago I was listening to it and listening to all their literal interpretations, which I feel is exactly what many would want. I think the powers that be want you to kind of take things that way, because then we're missing the bigger picture here. So the exact dimensions are measured by an angel, and reported to be 12,000 stadia, which is equivalent to 1,400 miles or 2,200 kilometers in length, width, and height. So even though these proportions may have a symbolic importance, doesn't mean they can't be literal. And this is out of EPM.org. So it's just fascinating to look at this. And, that gets you thinking of something more modern day, which I think Cindy was alluding to. Star Trek and the Borg, a perfect cube as we see it catching the Enterprise in its tractor beam. Again, a perfect cube over the Earth. Interesting. This reeks of AI, does it not? As we see, Picard becoming part of the Borg here.
I will not assimilate.
Right? That's exactly what, Cindy is getting towards. It's interesting that we have all these different things that we could look back on, put the pieces together. And of course, we are reading today things about how things may never get back to normal, along those lines, and travel restrictions, and perhaps maybe even, you won't be able to even go food shopping or go to school or unless you assimilate to the Borg. So that is what we're being faced with, and very curious references. And, I can't help but think of New Jerusalem when we see this Borg, because, the symbolism is kind of right there in our faces. Very, very interesting times we live in.
Oh my gosh, they are very curious.
So guys, as always, thank you for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. God bless, keep your eyes on the skies, and namaste.
Namaste.
Remote viewing is the military term for viewing a target with the mind's eye. Remote viewings are conducted under double-blind conditions, meaning that the target assigner and the viewers are unaware of what they are viewing. They are simply given an arbitrary number. The Future Forecasting Group was recently given the target number H506B3T9. That was the only information they had. It was only after the viewing that they learned what the target was.
Drum roll, please. You guys were looking at the Rapture, the global religious event of an unknown time.
The target was the split rapture event. In Christianity, it is the rapture, when believers are taken into heaven while the rest of humanity suffers the tribulation. The raw material calls this event the harvest, and says it happens every 25,000 years when those who have spiritually evolved ascend to a higher dimension, while those who don't are reincarnated back into the third dimension. According to Christians who believe in it, to be raptured, you must believe in Christ. The raw material is from an exhaustive channeling experiment that took decades to achieve, and the source claims to be a group of entities known as the Council of Nine, or Ra, the same Ra of ancient Egypt, here to assist mankind in their spiritual evolution. And the FFG team saw all of this in their viewing. To see if they are all getting the same data, remote viewers work in teams, and they all saw the event spanning from what was described as ancient Egypt or the Middle East into the present day. They saw an event that required one's loyal submission or worship to higher beings. They saw a major event happening in the heavens. They saw what appeared to be a major cataclysmic event tied to the great year of roughly 25,000 years, something that many researchers predict and the raw material confirms. And they all saw non-human entities behind this event. Riordan even saw a Council of Nine and a blue bird, which is how they describe themselves in the raw material. They saw what appeared to be another planet, one with an inhospitable atmosphere that required domed cities. They saw underground bases, and they saw the infamous gray aliens.
And then we're seeing one of these guys again. Continuation of a species. They got to do what they got to do. No regrets. But the sense is like, help us. Like, they need our help. Again, this idea of like a manifest destiny to inhabit a corporeal being.
According to UFO research, the most common story is that the Greys destroyed their own planet and came to Earth to experiment on mankind in a desperate attempt for survival. No longer able to reproduce sexually, they experiment on mankind with genetic science and technology to sustain their own species. And according to the raw material, there are two factions of non-humans on Earth. One is on the path of service to others, here to help humanity spiritually liberate itself, and the other is on the path of service to self, here to enslave humanity for their own selfish needs. Allgaier saw several images of how the soul is attached to the human body, how it is removed, and how these creatures were attempting to manipulate the process with a Neuralink. And practically the whole team saw barbaric experiments on mankind with brain chips, animal mutilations, animal-human hybrids, and transhumanist hardware, as if creating some sort of human Frankenstein was the only way for their species to survive. They could be viewing the biblical mark of the beast, and also the Orion group from the raw material, otherwise known as the Greys, who seek to use humanity for their own selfish needs. They saw UFOs, major events in the sky, and a mass exodus. It is interesting to note that Elon Musk wants to give everyone brain implants and says we need to escape the planet. President Trump created Space Force, and a year later, former Israeli space chief Hayim Eshed said that extraterrestrials exist, and Trump knows about it. It is also important to note that I am seeing their remote viewing through my own filter, but you can watch the full presentation for yourself and draw your own conclusions at futureforecastinggroup.com. Reporting for InfoWars, this is Greg Reese.